DevelopSec, Developing Security Awareness with James Jardine, brought to you by Jardine Software. Hi, and welcome to episode 26 of the DevelopSec podcast. I am your host, James Jardine, and today I want to talk a little bit about the crucial role that QA plays in the security game of the industry. All right, when we think about talking about creating applications, we have a lot of different roles that we have. So we have the business analyst, the project managers, the application owner, we have developers, we have QA, all these different roles that help define and shape this application that we're going to release. And, it's been at least a decade that we've been talking about security in applications. Yet every day in the news we see new applications being breached, new companies having information leaked out, the latest being Adult Friend Finder, releasing a whole bunch of information, which is kind of interesting due to the type of information that's being released and how we normally rate that information as far as what is sensitive information, what are we concerned about, and that one kind of brings a little bit of a different twist to it. But, one of the things we have is we have groups in-house. We call it quality assurance. I'm sure some of you out there listening are performing that role now or work closely with people that do perform that role. And traditionally, QA is finding a different type of bug, right? We're looking for flaws in the system, whether it's typos, right? It could be that simple. There's something wrong with the UI. To stuff's not functioning to the point where a customer or a user can't use the system to perform the functionality they're expecting, right? I want to be able to add items to a spreadsheet. I want to be able to print that spreadsheet. I want to be able to save it to a PDF. I need to be able to transfer money from one account to another account. I want to view my account balance. QA typically looks at ensuring that defined functionality works as expected. But what we're seeing is we're often delegating that security testing off to third-party groups, whether it's an internal security team, right? Whether they do internal pen testing or any type of internal security testing, whether it's an external third-party pen testing team, or even more recently, we see the bug bounties and some other ways out there where it's kind of a third-party QA environment to allow people to look for the security vulnerabilities. But we really don't have to rely solely on those teams to do security testing, right? A lot of security testing is not difficult. You may hear out there, it's a different mindset. It's the hacker mindset to be able to test for security vulnerabilities. Well, I'll tell you that it's not a whole lot different, right? One, a lot of people don't understand what is this hacker mindset? What do I need to know? How come I don't know how to do that? And, some people will sit there and say, I'm born with this ability. It's not something we're born with, right? It's a level of curiosity. It's just a different way of looking at the application. As I mentioned, QA likes to look at things as this function is supposed to work like this. Does it work like this? And, I might put in a character, and if an error displays or something, do I ensure the application didn't crash completely? Can it recoup? Can it keep going? But with this other mindset, this other way of looking at these different types of flaws is, how can I make the system add additional functionality? How can I use that bug that you just saw to get the application to do something it wasn't meant to do? Now, from a security perspective, we have things that are simple, like detailed error messages, right? I put a single code in, I get an error message back about a SQL error message, or I put some characters in there that cause the application to throw an internal server error, and it returns me back some information specific to the server, the application. Maybe I see a stack trace. That's probably as simple as it gets when we talk about security testing is finding those type of simple flaws, and those are probably more related to what we normally see in a QA environment of, hey, I put in some characters and I got back an error message. Did I get the screen I was expected to see? Yes, I did, or no, I didn't. But there's so much more to it that, again, isn't as difficult as it's made to sound, right? I want to make sure that the user of this account can only see his account and he can't see the account of another user. Well, in many cases, those accounts are defined by some sort of unique identifier. And while we're starting to see a little bit more of using actual GUIDs or something like that for the unique identifier, most times they're just numbers, right? It's a numerical int that is like 5 or 600 or 751. And it's usually in a parameter in the query string. And changing that, right? Say my ID is 751. Well, what happens if I change that to a 752, right? 1, what should I expect? And 2, what actually happens? Now, what should I expect is if I change to 752 and that's an account I don't have access to, it gives me an authorization denied type of error. What shouldn't be expected is it displays me the account information of some other user. Now, if we go back to what QA normally looks for, if we define, and this brings business into this as well as we start doing design requirements and actually building up the design of the application, if we define that if I try to access the account of another user, that I should receive an authorization error message, well, then we've fallen back into the traditional QA testing anyway, because the functionality states if I look at somebody else's account or attempt to, I should get back this error message. If I get back anything else, right, the software is not functioning as expected. And that's just another simple example. By no means are there not complex security issues out there. But a lot of the ones that we're identifying out on these sites are fairly simple, and it's easy for us to recognize. Now, some reasons why QA is important for this, right? Why there is a critical role in our application development lifecycle is our proximity. QA is close to the situation. You've heard many times, hey, it's going to cost a lot more to fix a bug that's found in production than to fix it in QA. And of course, there's lots of reasons to that. One being now we don't have to go through all the cycles. Right? If I find it in QA, it immediately goes back to development. It gets fixed, back up into QA. If I find it in production, that means it's going back to development. It's got to get fixed. It's then going to go back to QA. May or may not pass QA the first time. Then back up to UAT, back into whatever other test environment you have, then finally pushed out to production. And depending on your release cycle, if you find something you believe is critical enough, are you pushing it out of cycle, and how much more does that cost? Right? And now we're taking time away in a new development cycle from the new things that we're creating to go back and fix things from previous. So if we can find it quicker, then that's going to be more beneficial to us. So because QA is the next phase in a development life cycle, we're going to get it a lot faster. Now, you can bring in companies that'll scan in a QA environment or a UAT environment, but a lot of the scanning is being done in production, right? How do we do scanning today? Well, we can implement, obviously, some automated scanners or something within our dev and QA cycles. We can implement or integrate in our internal testing teams if we have one, and not everybody has an internal security testing team, but if we have one, we can bring it in, and maybe they can test a little bit more often than external teams. But the issue we see is a lot of people complain, and I don't like the word complain, but that we have a shortage of cybersecurity professionals, that we don't have enough people internally to do all of this stuff. So if we can get QA to hit a lot of these low-level items really quick, well, then that's less that we have to wait for them, right? And it's a quicker turnaround. We can do our external teams, but most times our external teams aren't testing until we get to a UAT environment, a production environment, when we're actually ready to go to production. Oftentimes we make the mistake of waiting till last minute to have somebody come in, pen test our app, and then we're hustling to fix any vulnerabilities they identify so we can quickly release out. And the reason for that is usually those tests are fairly costly and a little bit more difficult to schedule, so it takes a little bit more to get that into our life cycle. Then finally, you've got the bug bounty side where you're seeing some companies go to, which we won't get into the details of bug bounties right now. We'll actually have a couple podcasts talking about bug bounties later on. But the bug bounty, now you have somebody that's most likely testing in production, that's testing at your site. There's no scheduled time frame. We don't know when they're going to test, right? We're just opened it up to, hey, there's a bunch of testers out here, and if they feel like testing your site, they can test your site, and if they find something, they'll let you know. So there's no set schedule to when that's going to happen. So we know there's a set schedule to QA. We know when we're pushing to QA, and we can utilize that to find at least some of the low-hanging fruit and start digging into some of these vulnerabilities that are out there. It's imperative that we start doing this. So in addition to proximity, we also have knowledge of the application. QA has an incredible knowledge of how an application works, right? You're testing this application all the time. You know what these functions are supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do. So creating this as an extension of what you're currently doing is incredibly simple, and you can take it slow. But one of the biggest things with understanding security flaws is that you understand how the application works normally. And then we can understand how the application works abnormally. I go back to that example of user A can see user B's account. Well, from an outside perspective, if I'm a third party, I see this and I'm thinking, yeah, that's definitely going to be a problem. But what happens if there's situations with the app where that's actually acceptable? Or maybe that is acceptable depending on the type of app that it is. QA knows that, right? QA knows who should be able to see what accounts. Company A can't see company B, but user A can see user C, right? So there's lots of different reasons for why something may be actually normal. And so now when you start getting out to the third party realm, you start getting false positives being thrown back in, and now you're spending your time focusing on these false positives and having to report back and say, no, this is how this actually does work. That's how it's supposed to be. That, again, is going to be less efficient, time lost. So with your knowledge of the application, you know these business rules. You know how the authorization, the authentication logic should work. Who's best to actually describe whether it's working as it should or separately than the QA team originally? And so that's why it's important, right? And it's an extension of our current test. I mean, we are testing this application for flaws. So let's not ignore that security bugs are flaws, right? Just because we throw the word security in them doesn't mean that there's some separate entity, right? We talk about we can't bolt security on, and I agree with that. You can't just kind of, we'll test security at the end, and if we find stuff, we'll throw it back in. No. We have to integrate security in, and it's more than integrating. Just, hey, we've got an application security guy that kind of deals with us every once in a while, or, if we have questions, we go to him, but, he kind of does most of our testing. What's the ratio of QA testers to application security engineers within your organization if you have application security engineers, right? You probably have way more QA people, dev people, business people. So as we start to build this in, we really start to understand the role of security and understand that this is just another bug. We just look at it a little differently. I'm not just ensuring that the app does A and B. I'm making sure that while I'm doing A, I can't do A squared. That type of thing. Now, some flaws don't require special knowledge of the application. Cross-site scripting, if I can get JavaScript to execute in your browser from your application that wasn't expected, it's easy. I don't need no knowledge of your thing. But We also have dynamic scanners, static scanners that we can integrate into our process that can help us identify those pretty simply as well. They're not real difficult to find. So QA is imperative, right? I mean, and this is our chance. This is our chance from QA to start picking this up. Don't just pick a champion when you're thinking about QA and security. Motivate people to make it part of their job. If you're in QA now, strive to do better. Strive to start picking up this information and start looking for these security flaws. We'll talk more in future episodes about using proxy servers and simple ways to test, and how can we start migrating some of these things into automated tests like we do our other tests, so we're not adding a whole bunch of overhead, because there is a concern of being overwhelmed that, oh man, I've got all this extra testing I need to do. But you'll see as we start getting business involved, and the designs start including more security standards, security considerations, that it will just start coming naturally into QA to start testing for this stuff. And as we go forward, we'll start seeing less and less of this making it into the QA environment, because we have that immediate feedback sending back down. The last point I want to make about why QA is important for this, and that's, we already have systems in place for bug tracking. And how many times have you seen, if you're in a bigger enterprise in QA, how many times have you seen that we have a different vulnerability management system for security flaws? So cross-site scripting, SQL injection, authorization bypass, right? Those don't even live in your normal security bug finder. They're often some sort of vulnerability management system. They're managed by the security team. You don't even have a whole lot of insight into them, right? Maybe you got an account to log into that system to see them, but we want to have a full view when we're getting ready to assess an application from a QA perspective of where we stand. Because how many meetings do you sit in where it's QA? Hey, QA, do we have the green light? How are we looking? And so we need that information just as much as information security does. So maybe there's a classification of, this one's classified as security, so we can generate a report and share that with the security team if this is what we have. But we got to get work to get it back into our systems. So when we're looking at the next sprint, when we're looking at the next dev cycle, hey, what do we need to fix? It's right there present. I don't have to log into a separate system. It's not a task I can just assign to one person and say, hey, you log into that system and developers work with it, or QA works with it. It's in our system. It's in our face every day. And it's going to help us strive to make better applications moving forward. So I think QA is important. I think it's a good chance for QA to step in and really start filling this role. I think, we need to have training for QA, right? And, we could definitely help with that. DevelopSec is there for that, right? Our goal is to help the business side, the QA side, the dev side, right? Building that integration between the teams to get security truly embedded in the system. I'm not looking to find a way to find somebody else to do some of these roles. I want to help you embed it into the system so these apps are more secure all the way through, and we become better at defining requirements, developing apps, testing the applications that are coming out. And I'm not saying that we're not good at it now, right? We create amazing applications. QA teams are doing amazing things with testing and, even creating efficiencies while they're doing testing to make it faster so we can get out to production a lot quicker with fewer flaws. The concern there is that right now, and traditionally, we don't focus as much on the security type of flaws out there, and whether that's a lack of understanding, which is most likely the case because it's, there's a separate culture about security that doesn't integrate well with development and QA and business. And so trying to find that connector to help that come inside will help make everybody better. And we want to do it in a positive way. We don't want the negative connotations. We want positive. Hey, we can do this. Let me show you how we can do this, how we can make things better, how we can improve your job, and maybe make it better for you, right? Some new challenges, some new things to find, coming up with new ways to do this is all positive stuff. And in the long run, it's going to make your application stand up better. Hopefully we'll see less flaws pop out that, ultimately come back to looking upon ourselves, the QA, the devs, the business analysts, of reputational, oh, hey, they missed this. We'll have less of that. And, I think we'll enjoy our work much better. So, like I said, this is the first in a few episodes we're going to talk about integrating QA, integrating business side of things and how they're involved. But I really wanted to take a moment to talk about how important QA is and how great of a job they do now and how they can enhance that to do even better at helping our security and the business overall to knock out some of these security flaws. So we'll talk more in the future about some simple ways to test, how we can start off, going in and doing this, defining some goals, because we do want measurable goals as we're doing QA of, hey, am I getting better? And we probably do that now, but how do we do that from a security perspective? Do we look at that differently? And so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, I am at DevelopSec on Twitter, probably the easiest way. You can also reach out to me. James@jardinesoftware.com is my main email address, because DevelopSec all falls under the Jardine software name. But if you have questions, you have thoughts, I love to talk about this stuff. Feel free, share this with as many people as you can. I'll also have a post similar to this up on the DevelopSec.com website. So you can go check that out if you'd just rather read this rather than listen to it. But if you have things that you're struggling with, send them over to me. Let me know, because I want to help. I want to help fix those issues, help you understand maybe what those issues are if you have questions about them, and get that moving forward. So I appreciate listening to episode 26 of the DevelopSec podcast, and I look forward to the next episode that we release in the near future. Thank you. You have been listening to the DevelopSec podcast with James Jardine. Follow us on Twitter at DevelopSec and visit our website at www.developsec.com for more episodes and information.